So welcome everyone. My name is Beth Kelly Galogly and I'm the founding director of this Wild Wonder Nature Journaling Conference. Welcome to our first keynote evening of this year's conference. I'm so excited to share this with you. This idea of Wild Wonder was born more than 2 years ago. And last year, with the help of an amazing team and volunteers and incredible teachers, we launched our first event in Monterey, California. And while we never imagined bringing this event online, we are blessed to have an amazing team of teachers and volunteers who have come together to make something beautiful in this very difficult time. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who has helped us put this conference together. I want to especially thank Roseanne Hansen, our fearless logistics director, who has been working tirelessly to address all the new technical challenges that this format has provided for us. We all are feeling our brains stretch during this process. We are all learning so much, and it will make it much easier for us to do this next time. And there will be a next time. I also want to thank our conference fiscal sponsor, Heyday, and our conference partner, the Foster, without whom we would not be able to offer this evening's special event with Tony Foster. I also want to thank you, our attendees, for joining us on this journey, for trusting us, and for helping us create this amazing community of Wild Wonder Nature Journaling Conference. I lastly want to thank Jack Laws for his exuberance, joy, dedication, and passion for teaching. Jack, you are the main reason this community exists. And on behalf of everyone here, thank you. I will more formally introduce Jack before his keynote on Sunday, but I do have 2 quick announcements tonight. At the end of the evening tonight, we will announce the winner of today's Nature Journal Challenge, and we will also be giving away a special piece of art by Tony Foster. And you will learn more about that piece of art in this evening's conversation. So if you would like to be eligible for that drawing at the end of the evening, you must be present to win. So among the people that are here at the end of the evening, we will be choosing one lucky, very lucky recipient. Trust me, Roseanne and Jack and I were already talking about, we really want this gift ourselves. So it's gonna be hard to give it away, but one of you is gonna get it. So hang in there and we will give those away at the end. Jack and I will pop back on at the end of the evening and take care of those 2 raffle items. I would now like to hand over the evening to John Muir Laws. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Wow, wasn't that an incredible day? Okay, my mind blown. I've been doing all of this whole brain drawing and my mindset, and I've been journaling up a storm and writing poetry. I wrote a poem today, and so I feel like my little toolkit is just getting more and more and more full, and we're just getting started on this bad boy. So hey, welcome, and I'm so happy that you're here. Somebody that Beth didn't mention that we want to send a shout out to is Beth. So that woman that you just saw has been doing crazy work behind the scenes to make all these logistics work, in addition to Roseanne and Brian and the team back there. All right, so everybody give it up for all of our sort of behind the scenes, behind the machine here. This running a Zoom meeting is actually, there's crazy logistics that they've been doing, and so I'm learning a lot. So they make it look easy, and the teachers that we had today, that was spectacular. So yeah, Foster, thank you guys for helping sponsor this, making this happen. Oh, this is kind of fun. Somebody was people were wondering about like I've never heard of this Foster place, and it is this kind of weird thing. There's this place in Palo Alto that is, has the artwork of this artist over there in England. And what's going on with that? Well, it turns out that the Foster exists because, well, there was a patron, a woman who looked at that stuff and said, "Whoa, this is crazy." And when you see like all the paintings together, you get it on a different level than if you saw one painting in one collector's living room. And so that's why she started the Foster. So it's also, I think, just kind of really beautiful to see that there actually still are patrons out here who are sponsoring and helping helping that kind of art and that kind of conservation message get out. So mad props to the Foster Museum and the people or person who really made that happen. So tonight, what we get to see is a recording of a conversation that Tony and I had about a week ago. And the two of us sat down to talk across the internet. It's just a little bit too late for him to be up right now, so that's why we recorded it in advance. But it was really, really fun, and we do kind of a deep dive into like, what does a guy do like that when COVID hits? Because my kind of general vision of Tony is like, as I mentioned, like it's going to be this guy sitting in a parka, with a huge easel strapped down in front of Everest. And that's not happening right now. But what is absolutely fascinating. And there are some really wonderful threads that you'll see through this discussion. I think you're really going to enjoy it. And just another chance to kind of get into the brain of this wonderful artist, conservationist, and supporter of education. So let's run the show, and we'll see you again at the end. And I think you're really going to enjoy tonight's presentation.
Good evening and welcome to Coping with COVID-19 Through Art and Nature from Cornwall to California with John Muir Laws and Tony Foster. Because this conversation is pre-recorded, I already know that you are all in for a great treat. My name's Kristen Poole and I'm the Artistic Director of the Foster, where I steward the Foster's relationship with British artist Tony Foster and the museums and the art institutions that are interested in sharing his artwork. I also serve as the Artistic Director of the Sun Valley Museum of Art in Idaho. Tony Foster's artistic practice is based on his journeys into the world's wildest places, rainforests and deserts, mountains and canyons, the Arctic and the tropics. For more than 40 years, he has been traveling on foot or by canoe, sometimes by kayak or raft, making camp, and then painting his often large-scale watercolors on site. His artworks reveal not only the landscape that he's living in, but also his observations of the flora and fauna, the geology, the ethnography, and the social history of place. The finished works incorporate souvenirs of maps, written diaries, and symbolic objects that Tony finds or that he constructs to further elucidate the place where he is painting. Tony Foster has had many solo exhibitions throughout the world, including at the Smithsonian Natural History Museum, the California Academy of Sciences, the Yale Center for British Art, the Museum of Northern Arizona, and the Royal Watercolor Society in London, to name a few. Exploring Beauty, Watercolor Diaries from the Wild, and Sacred Places, Watercolor Diaries from the American Southwest, are two journeys that can be enjoyed in their entirety at the Foster, a museum space in Palo Alto, California, which unites and shares these journeys of Tony's to inspire reflection, discussion, and education about art, wilderness, and the natural world. The other artist in our conversation is somebody that I think many of you are deeply familiar with. He is a scientist, a naturalist, an author, and an educator. John Muir Laws, who is the author and illustrator of the Laws Guide to Nature Drawing and Journaling, the Laws Guide to Drawing Birds, and the Laws Guide to the Sierra Nevadas, has written these books among many other titles. Jack is the founder and the host of the Nature Journal Club, which began more than 7 years ago as a regional San Francisco Bay Area group and now has blossomed into a vibrant, worldwide community of thousands of people passionate about nature, art, science, curiosity, and wonder, who explore nature through the pages of their own journals. For more than 35 years, Jack has dedicated his life to teaching and to writing, helping people forge a deeper and more personal connection with nature by keeping illustrated nature journals. As both a scientist and as an artist, Jack has developed interdisciplinary programs that enable and empower students of all ages to observe with rigor and to refine techniques to become intentionally curious about the world around them. In short, through his dedication and infectious with enthusiasm and masterful teaching, Jack helps people fall in love with nature through the pages of their journals, thereby inspiring more stewards of the earth at a time when they are surely and sorely needed. John Muir Law's work has been nationally recognized. He is a Together Green Conservation Leadership Fellow with the National Audubon Society. He has also been Educator of the Year for the California Institute for Biodiversity, and most recently, he was named the 2020 Bay Nature Local Hero, awarded for his work in environmental education. It is an enormous privilege and pleasure to be able to virtually bring these two incredible personalities together for you here for the Wild Wonder Conference. In this conversation, John Muir Laws and Tony Foster reflect on their experiences during the novel coronavirus pandemic. This spring, Tony was confined to his home in Cornwall, England, except he was allowed to go out for one walk each day. Setting out from his home for exercise, fresh air, and a fresh outlook, Tony constructed a daily diary of painted and written observations using original notes and drawings. The resulting artwork, Lockdown Diary 56 Days, beautifully illustrates his stay-at-home experience during this pandemic. Now I urge you to settle in and let's dive right in and listen to these two fabulous and interesting people.
Well, I'm just delighted to have a chance to talk to you from across the pond and to share some of the things that have been going on with me and what I've been thinking, and to find out what you have been up to. I've been inspired by your work for years, and how your work has changed in this strange time we're in, where everything seems to have changed. When I think of your work, here's the vision that pops into my head. I imagine you in a really warm hat, in this really thick jacket and big gloves, in front of Everest, or in a landscape like that. And in front of you is a canvas that stretches from over there to over there. And you've somehow got that staked into the ground so it's not going to go flying over the next cliff. And you've been there for months, and you're like deep into celebrating this one view of one place. And that's not what's going on for you right now. Just for the record, I do know that that's an oversimplification of your process. But I was wondering if maybe it would be fun to start, because there's some people who will be watching this who don't know as much about you and the way you walk in this world. Maybe just to sort of paint the picture of what your regular process is. And then, since this virus has swept across the globe, how your practice and your experience has changed or stayed the same.
Right. Well, you're quite right, of course, that to describe my work is to say that it's all about a celebration, really, of the world's great wildernesses, mountains or canyons or deserts or rainforests or the Arctic or the tropics. And so all of these places are grist to my mill, really, and I work generally on projects which might take 3 years to do, and they will be about a certain subject. They will always have a theme, and they'll be about. They're described as journeys, but they're an amalgamation of many journeys which are brought together in one thematic final grand journey of perhaps 30 or 40 paintings. And of course, the whole point about wilderness is that there's no way to get in there apart from either walking or canoeing or kayaking or rafting. In other words, you have to go by a river or you have to walk. You have to climb up into the mountains. The point of a wilderness is there aren't any roads, there aren't any gas stations, there aren't any motels. They're simply places which have been completely left alone by mankind. And the work is a celebration of even in this, what we think of as a very crowded planet, there are these places of exquisite beauty which have just been left alone. And okay, they're shrinking, they're threatened, they're under attack by all sorts of reasons, but they still exist. And I think it's my job to go out there into these wild places, to live there for a while, generally in a tent, and to simply bring back to civilization evidence of the fact that these extraordinary places exist. The work isn't simply about finding a particularly exquisite piece of landscape and metaphorically putting a frame around it and copying it. It's about trying to describe what it's like, not just to look at not just what it looks like, but also what happens while you're in there, while you're living in this place. What happens to you? Because most people don't have the privilege of being able to spend weeks or even a couple of months in these strange and wild and wonderful places, and so all sorts of things happen to you when you're there. You'll see all sorts of marvelous things while you're painting, not just the landscape itself, but a snake will slither past, or a pair of giant tapirs will wander in front of you and start pulling at the leaves in the rainforest, or giant anteater will come up and sniff at my boots, or
Oh, wait, hold on, wait. You can't just drop that on us. And so a giant anteater came and sniffed your boots.
yes.
Oh,
And it's because I sit there for so long that I've sort of become part of the environment myself. And one of the wonderful things that used to happen in the rainforest was I used to sit with a beautiful lizard on each leg, which would be waiting there, just catching the insects as they came to bite me, because I was obviously a wonderful bait for the insects, and these two lizards would take up residence on my legs in order to catch them as they came in, and so that was a sort of symbiotic relationship, I think. And so all sorts of wonderful things happen to you.
Beautiful.
And terrible things too. I mean, you hear chainsaws sawing down the trees in the rainforest when you're sitting there, and so awful things happen too. And but mostly what happens is extraordinary and wonderful. And so I don't just, I can't paint everything that I see, and so I do studies of all sorts of bits and pieces that catch my attention, and I collect little samples of things and what I call souvenirs, but they're symbolic objects that I incorporate into the work, and I write my diaries onto the work so that people have some understanding as to what it's like to actually do this painting, what it's like to sit there for a long time. And it sort of draws people into the work, I think, so that they feel they've had a greater experience to look at it than if they simply see a painting of a marvelous place.
Right. It's interesting that you say that, because that's very much the sense that I get when I look at your work. You have been immersed in this place. You're doing this live in the field. And there's a lot of people that'll go out, they'll take a photograph, they'll come home and they'll work it from the photograph in the comfort of their studio. And it a lot of these can be very technically well rendered, but there's something that I get from yours, is that there's a feeling of time, there's a feeling of place. Those little vignettes along the bottoms of many of your paintings that kind of will show that here's this critter that I found, here's the snake, here's a sample of sand from the beach that I'm sitting on, here are some shells that I found there. Those little things, it's where it takes me is that I'm looking out and I'm getting the big picture, but you're also intentionally zooming in on the subtle kind of it doesn't have to be spectacular to be wonderful and to catch our attention.
Yeah.
It just has to be there, and because it's there, it's got an inherent value, an inherent interest to it. So it's a vial of sand, but it's special because it's connected with a place in time in the history of the planet.
And also, I try sometimes to refer to a history, or to time, or to the to the fact that although very often we don't acknowledge them in wild places, there are often people living there, and so I try to acknowledge the ethnography of the place. There are and the sort of history of it, and so on. So I try and incorporate all these things. I suppose I'm I suppose I'm always, I'm not an authority on anything. I'm completely self-taught, and so I suppose I'm just curious. And what I loved about the things that you always say is that it's about paying attention, and as far as I'm concerned, that's what it is about. It's about paying attention. I don't know about you, but I can remember when I was young, I knew everything, and and the older I get, the more I realize how little I know. And of course, that makes you curious about everything. There are aspects of our existence that are constantly striking you as extraordinary, and that is about I suppose being rather humble in that you begin to realize just how little you know about things. I remember when I was working in the rainforest, and I was lucky enough to stay in a scientific research station, and in Golfito down on the Panama border, and the scientists there, I usually find when I arrive at these places, the scientists don't have much time for me. They think I'm a waste of space. That you know, your bunk could have been taken by a scientist doing something useful instead of you kind of frivolous, you frivolous artists coming here and poking around. And so I would just get on with my work, and knowing perfectly well that if I just got up in the morning, went out, found my site, sat down, started work, and then came in the evening, had my dinner, went to bed. If I did that long enough, they would be so curious about what I was doing that they would have to come and find me. And then having found me, they would suddenly realize that actually they might have something to contribute about this. They might say, well, do you know what that tree's called? And I'd say, no, I don't know what it's called. I only know what it looks like. And so they'd say, oh, that's such and this is the Latin name. And then they'd start to bring me samples of things. I mean, they brought me beautiful little poison dart frogs of all different colors, for example. They would bring them to me in a jam jar, and they say, do you want to paint that? And I said, I would love to paint that. And I would paint this little poison dart frog, and then they would take it back and they were scrupulous about this. They would take it back and put it in its own territory, put it back where they found it. And by the end of the time there, I had a nice little sheet of studies of poison dart frogs. And some of those people have been, lifetime friends because they were so intrigued by the fact that I'm self-sufficient. I simply go out, I get on with my work, I'm serious about it, and they're sort of won over to the idea that maybe art isn't such a frivolous undertaking, but there's something going on there that they don't quite understand.
So when I go out and I explore, I like to sort of think of in the back of my head, my search image for what I'm looking for. There are two things, and you've mentioned both of them, and they're wonder and beauty. And so when I'm going out for a walk, I sort of stop at the things that kind of make me go, right? Just it can be initially like the sort of beauty that I would see. You mentioned the tropical sunset. The thing that kind of looks like a Wayland painting with, whales jumping by the sunset and the wave crashing on the beach, and go, oh, that's beautiful, because we've been trained to think this is beautiful. But then how can you get your brain to sort of recalibrate to let in the micro beauties, the little moments of sunlight on grass, or the way that wind moves through a field of tall grass, the cascading sound of that same wind coming through pine needles, first distance and then rushing over you. So finding these little moments of beauty and getting yourself to stop and to notice there's beauty here, and to train yourself to. I'd be interested in your process in two things. One is how, when I look at your pages and the stuff that you do, you see big beauty and you see micro beauty. And I'd be interested in your process of how is it just by doing it over time, or do you have any things that you are doing to help you kind of let that beauty in? The other thing that I do kind of that stops me out in the field is wonder. And those are the sort of, I talking about sort of the things that make you go, And you were talking about the importance of being curious and finding mysteries. So I like to try to find little micro mysteries around me all the time. And when I get like really leaning in on one of these, it makes that curiosity holds my attention, holds my focus, holds me there in engaging and interacting with whatever little piece of nature it is for long enough for the stories that are inside of things to start to come out. And I was wondering if you had any strategies that you're doing that help you tune into wonder and beauty, both on the big scale and this will kind of also help us in thinking about kind of what we're doing during this time of COVID. How do you train yourself to see the beauty and the wonder in the parts of nature that speak a little bit more softly? How do you train yourself to listen to those?
Well, I mean, there are a couple of points there. I think in a way, my practice has always been to sort of try and take myself by surprise. I'm not a great proponent of technique. I've never read a book about how to do watercolor painting. And I mean, I know the difference between a dry wash and a wetted wet. But on the other hand, I've never taken any lessons or done anything like that, because I've always just tried to be absolutely honest about what I'm seeing and try to render it in such a way that it expresses what I want to say about it. And so when I once did a big exhibition all about the Grand Canyon. I went to the canyon for 3 or 4 years, making this exhibition, and walked hundreds of miles in the inner canyon, and generally got to know the place pretty well. And by the end of it, I had a way of working which I thought pretty well expressed what I wanted to say about the canyon. And I thought that my next exhibition after that was going to be about deserts. And so I started work on a series of paintings about deserts. But in the end, I stopped because I realized that what I was doing was simply almost busking it. I thought, oh, I know how to paint this stuff. And so I wasn't actually, physically, it was very challenging, but actually in terms of making paintings, I didn't feel that I was really exploring things sufficiently for myself. And so I thought what I need really is to do something completely different from the Grand Canyon. And so that's when I went to paint rainforests, because you couldn't find anything more different than rainforests. And then I had to learn all over again how to paint rainforests. I had to look very, very closely. I had to think about how do you actually get those leaves coming towards you? How do you get the density of the thing? How do you actually make a painting out of something that could just like wallpaper, green wallpaper it could be. But so you have to figure out actually what's the focal point of this? Where's your eye going to go to it? It's so extraordinarily complex, and of course, it's also wet as hell. So you're constantly wet, you're constantly muddy, you're constantly
and your watercolor never dries, so everything becomes wet and wet.
Yeah, everything rots. I mean, even your belly button rots. You know that if you sit in the rainforest for long enough, you get green mold in your belly button. Well, I mean, you have to.
This is. I'm going to make a note about that. Note to self.
Your underwear ends up
but fortunately,
shredded.
you've got that lizard on your knee. You've got that lizard on your knee who's helping just kind of take care of you and watch you. So what you're saying, just to reinforce this, you're saying that after spending so much time in the Grand Canyon, you got really good at that landscape.
Yeah.
And so you intentionally then make it more difficult for yourself by going to a completely different place, because if you just have a technique that works, you might be applying that technique instead of really pushing yourself to see and perceive and to learn something new.
Excellent. That's exactly right. Yes.
And so you're intentionally pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And what's neat about that is the sweet spot for growing your brain. If you are doing what is comfortable, right? You get really good at the deserts. I'm going to do another desert. Bam, there's another desert. You want a mesa? I can give you a mesa. Boom, there it is. And by the way, your mesas are I see why after doing that Grand Canyon stuff, you'd be like, yeah, I got this. I mean, it really looks like those crazy formations. What you're doing, it works as an artist. Boom, right? But then you intentionally go do something that is challenging for you. That is exactly where we want to be for this idea of a growth mindset, being able to, if you are always pushing yourself and you're not just sort of sitting where it's comfortable, you're always learning, you're always growing, you're always developing skills. And that can be in learning how to appreciate a new place. Like you're talking about, like, then I need to discover that I need to find the focal point so it's not the Great Green Wall. Or the challenges of all these, foliage doing that, the vines coming through, and from being in the place where it's like bare and you just are seeing the bones of everything, where to the other part where it's like everything is alive. And I mean, I just what I love about that is that is a really functional example of being deliberate in your practice about how to kind of keep yourself somewhere in the growth curve where things are challenging and you're developing, you're learning. And for all of us, if we can kind of move into that sweet spot, so just surfing just outside of your comfort zone, that's where we learn.
Yeah.
That's really, really, this is an amazing example. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, when I look at the stuff that you do, you probably had the experience where you're walking along, you can be walking along somewhere and people are just passing back and forth. But if you stop somewhere and you notice something and you start drawing it and making observations about it and start putting it in your journal, people will come up and they'll look over your shoulder and then they will look up at whatever it is. And then they'll go like, oh, wow, that's really cool. Let's say you go to a zoo and there's a little sleeping mandrill or something over there, and you start sketching the sleeping mandrill. Then families will come up behind you. They'll start looking at the sleeping mandrill. They'll like the sleeping mandrill. And because they're seeing that, like, you've given this much attention. Yeah. Oh, this has value, because otherwise you wouldn't be paying this much attention to it. And then they look up at the mandrill and they go like, oh, wow, that is really, really cool. And then they get out their little cameras. Or if you're painting along the side of a trail somewhere, people will come up and they would have just passed on by this spot, but they see like, oh, you're drawing this? Oh, cool. And then they'll take pictures of that spot and then they'll turn and they'll walk on down the trail, because what you're doing is the act of attention and the love that you are giving this place and the time that you took there, it's a sign that's saying, like, actually, wait a minute, because there is something special. There's a story here that needs to be heard. And here's my presentation of it. And then it arrests us, that energy that you put into it. It arrests us, it stops us, and we're looking at it, and then we go like, oh. And we get a connection from it. But the vehicle to that, if we had actually been in that place, we might not have stopped. But
no, that's quite right. I agree. Yeah. I usually try and tuck myself away where I don't encounter many people. But I can remember painting in Yosemite Valley, where, which is obviously swarming with people. And the number of times, as you say, people will be walking along, we're paying not much attention, and then they see me painting this thing and they go, oh, we better take a photograph of this. And not of me, but of this, what I'm painting, because, as you say, I'm focusing on it, so therefore it gives it some enhanced value. And so they then look at it and think, oh, okay, better photograph it.
And what that is that the journal page or the painting is for the individual who's doing it, it is a way of kind of getting deeper into the world where we see structure and we start to make understanding. And when somebody else looks at our page, they go like, oh my gosh, that is a wonderful little twig. It helps people sort of see, both for the person who's doing it and then somebody, it's so much fun looking at other people's journal pages. And you look at this, you're like, oh, you noticed that, all right? And it is, what it is that time and care and attention that you've spent interacting with something is then, it's shining a spotlight on that. And which makes me think about kind of, at least for me, my process during this strange time when the COVID epidemic has swept across the planet. And I used to be kind of running out and exploring all over the place. And with COVID, I'm much more in a lockdown mode. I'm living in kind of a residential area on the side of San Francisco Bay. If I walk out of my house, I'm kind of walking down a suburban street. I turn the corner, I'm walking down another suburban street. I go a couple more blocks, it's the freeway. And it's not Yosemite, it's not Grand Canyon, it's not these sorts of things. And so my practice has changed dramatically. And what I'm finding is that really, when I go and if I find just some commonplace thing, some weed coming up between the cracks, if I find a chrysalis, if I find my neighbor's plants are doing something interesting, my neighbors are much better gardeners than I am. I want to check out what you've been doing during COVID, but I'll just kind of give you an introduction to what I've been up to. So pre-COVID, I was running around and going to the mountains and getting their glad tidings, and nature's peace flowed into me like sunshine flows into trees.
That's a quote.
Yes. But then COVID hits, and they're saying like, you know what? It's going to be better for everybody if we just kind of hunker down. So I've been really hunkering down, and I haven't been exploring. So this is the onion that sprouted in my pantry. Right? and so my daughter decided to adopt it. So we kept this onion, and over the next few weeks, months, until this thing just, I hoped that it would turn into this wonderful thing. I ended up putting it in water, and then it rotted, and it became.
Well, that's part of nature too.
But I fell in love with this crazy onion. I loved this onion. My daughter named it, and we just had so much fun. And then the orange turned moldy.
Oh,
and right. So, but what I'm finding is just like in the landscape of this little orange, I can find wonder and beauty. And that has kept me sane.
Nice.
And so I'm now kind of with smaller things, kind of exploring in those. And that process slows me down, kind of takes me out of my head, gets me to breathe and relax and focus. And it has been a really amazing way for me to kind of get out of my head and just start paying more attention to what is real and what is right in front of me. And it's been an essential way for me to survive this lockdown. But I'm very curious about you, because again, you've got mountain legs, you've got mountain lungs, you've got you can work the logistics of the giant canvas in the Himalaya. And what this COVID experience has been like for you. And so I'm wondering, first of all, just logistically, what your process has been. And then I'd also be really interested in, if it has changed, how has that changed you? How have you changed by your response to this COVID epidemic? And I hope that you're doing well and safe. But I'm really wondering about what is your process been?
I mean, as you can imagine, I had all sorts of plans for this year, which were all swept aside. I'm working on an exhibition at the moment about the Green River, which is due to open in the Whitney in Cody in 2022, and I started that 2 years ago, and worked on it again last year, and was due to canoe the lower reaches of the river through Utah to where it joins the Colorado with some friends in the spring this year. But of course that has now had to be postponed until next year, and we, fingers crossed, it'll be safe to go and do it, but of course we don't know. And so there was a sort of screeching of brakes really in the Foster household, and I suddenly had to start to think, okay, well, we did enter a very serious lockdown in which we were only allowed to walk out from our homes theoretically for an hour a day, but in practice I broke the law a little in that I seldom ever saw anybody on my walks. I didn't think I was actually doing any harm, taking a little longer than an hour. And so on the day one of the lockdown, I thought, well, I've got to do something which I can't just sit indoors and read a book. That's not my nature. I have to work at something. And so I devised this plan that I would do a different walk every day in as much as that was physically possible to do that. I would devise a different route every day in my local area. And then I would take with me a little notebook, sketchbook, and I would make sketches and notes about the things that I found on that journey every day. And it wouldn't have to be, it could be anything. It could be a little landscape. It could be a tree in blossom. It could be a butterfly. It could be a leaf. It could be some little sticks washed up on the beach. It could be some shells. It could be absolutely anything that caught my attention. But I knew that I had to find something for that day, to say something about that day. And each day certainly turned up something that I thought, whoa, that's really interesting. It may have been, a moorhen with her little chicks, which are like little really sooty black ping pong balls when walking across to the pond. And I just thought, that is so exquisite. They're such wonderful mothers, moorhens, and they're so they guard their chicks so carefully and usher them into the pool, and they're constantly making sure they're okay, which is just as well because there's a big pike in this particular pond which does take moorhen chicks and duckling chicks. Oh. But anyway, and so that was one day, and then another day it would simply be a little landscape, or it would be a bunch of trees, or it would be a particularly nice field that I happened to see that suddenly come into bloom with wildflowers, or it would be I'm very fortunate in that the village I live in has got an extraordinarily varied selection of environments that I can work on. I mean, we've got the sea. I'm only a quarter of a mile from the sea and the cliffs. So I've got the beaches, I've got cliffs, I've got the sea itself. I've got we can walk up to the fringes of Bodmin Moor, so there's sort of slightly bleak moorland kind of landscapes. There's a wonderful place which was heavily industrialized in the 19th century and now has overgrown with the most wonderful beech trees, and every spring it's covered in bluebells, and the beech trees come out with their incredibly luminous green leaves, and then the bluebells are almost they're so vibrant in their color. The complementary color of the purple of the bluebell and the green of the leaf just vibrate together, and and so I can walk up and see that. Obviously I'm not much of a bird spotter, not like you. I'm not an expert on it, but I can tell a hawk from a handsaw, and so I might do something about a bird, or I might, whatever I happen to find, a bone, a twig, a shell, as I say, anything. And each day I would not only I would record my route, I would make notes in my little notebook about what the weather was like and what I encountered, and any other sort of philosophical thoughts that I happen to have. I'm not a great philosopher, but I do think about things. And each day, then I would bring that back to my studio, and in the afternoon I would make a little painting out of it, and I would I put all these paintings together. 56 days the lockdown lasted, and so each day I would contribute an extra little section to it, and in the end it ended up like a rather nice looking patchwork quilt, really. I mean, it's 56 little studies of things I saw every day, and then a map and notes and my thoughts for the day and so on. And so that's really what kept me sane, was this idea that I had this project and I didn't know how long it's going on for. But actually, I'd have been perfectly happy if it had gone on for 100 days. It wouldn't 200 days. I didn't care, because I knew that I was contributing something and keeping my practice going and actually exploring. I always say, I'm a bit of an explorer. I was exploring my local area. In fact, I walked to places I'd never walked to before, which is astonishing, as we've lived here for 45 years. And I still found new places. I thought, I've never been here before. I've never been down this little path. Where does that go? And I would go and find my way around these new places. So it was a project that kept me sane, I think. And in the end, I put all these things together. So it's a big sheet of, it's actually 56, 7 days. It's 8 weeks altogether, and each sheet is 7 days, and then there's a panel along the bottom with some souvenirs and notes and quotes and things on it. I took over our classic 1920s red telephone box in the village, because British Telecom, who used to install the phone in there, took it out because everybody's got mobile phones now. They no longer need a payphone. And I got our parish council to buy it from them for £1, and I rent it from them for £1 a year. And I've turned it into Cornwall's, or it might even be the world's smallest art gallery. And I have changing exhibitions in there of local talent and local history and local collections. And people approach me and say, could I exhibit, my collection of Star Wars? I say, sure, let's have a look. And so, we obviously got local artists, we got jewelers, we got potters, we got all sorts of people. And so I do a monthly exhibition, and on this, at the end, when I finished my lockdown diary, I put it up in the phone box, and we call it the art box, and people were really uplifted by it, which was wonderful, really. The response was, that I had found something uplifting to do during this terrible time, and so that was really worthwhile, I thought. Yes.
So, so there's both the creating this work and then sharing it to inspire and motivate other people and to connect with other people.
Yeah. And the nice thing was there were kids there were kids coming up with their little sketchbooks and looking at things and with a magnifying glass, and I'd see them walking around the streets with a magnifying glass and making little notes and things after they'd seen my lockdown diary. So that was really nice.
That's really cool. Hey, let's take a look at some of those. Let's take a look at some of those little moments, some of the days from your diaries.
Sure.
Oh, these are your ramblings? These are your routes?
Yeah. 56 different routes.
Tommy, this is so cool. I love the way you think.
My house is where it's the thickest, of course, because I came out of there every morning. So I did So the thinner ones are ones that, I only did one bit up there, but I came in and out of that bit 56 times.
Oh,
It's just
hi.
so great to show what the variety is, and how that intention of going out and doing something different every single day results in this wonderful display. Tony, you should explain where Tywadreth is.
Oh, okay.
I don't necessarily know where Tywadreth is.
Really? Surely everybody knows where Tywadreth is. Tywadreth is a small village in Cornwall, on the south coast. Cornwall, I think, is one of the most exquisite places in the world. It's got absolutely everything anybody could possibly want. It's got the sea. It's got the sea all around it. It's got moorland. It's got woodland. It's got forests. It's got cliffs. It's got everything you could possibly want. And Tywadreth is a very, what can I say? We love the place. We've been here 45 years. It's a working village full of wonderful people. It's a great community, got a fantastic pub, and we're just very, very fortunate to live here. And Tywadreth Marsh is a little patch of, it's only, I don't know, maybe it's 50 or 70 acres, I think, of marshland, which is there simply because it used to be meadow, in fact, but when they stopped pumping the mines, they used to pump the water out of the mines, the copper mines, and when they stopped pumping them, the water flooded into these low-lying meadows and turned it into marshland. And so it's a wonderful, wonderful little wildlife place, and I've done many paintings there. In fact, I went there to practice painting when I was going to the rainforest, because I thought that's the nearest thing you could find in the UK to rainforest. So I went to practice there before I went. And so I walk through the marsh very often, and this is a little study of just a little patch of marshland with its lovely little oak trees and willow trees and the irises, black irises. Anyway, it says day 8, Tywadreth Marsh. Without traffic or aircraft noise, the bird song sparkles in the morning air. It just struck me that it was so quiet that all we could hear was bird song, and that you don't often hear that in what we call civilization. So I really enjoyed that. So that's
and it also really just sort of ties us into this strange moment that we are in history, where
everything stopped. Yeah,
everything is stopped, and the birds are there and responding. That's beautiful. And just
there's a note on one of these pictures. I didn't see it, but when I got home from my walk, somebody said, "Did you see that?" And I said, "What?" And they said, "A roe deer walked through Tywadreth." I didn't see it, unfortunately. But imagine, so the wildlife actually was taking back its territory.
Oh, that's neat. And also just logistically, as a journaler and a sketcher, these little small format things, it's something that you would be able to complete in a shorter period of time.
Yes,
and so keeping the work, if you kind of challenge yourself to do something that is too logistically difficult, you're not going to be able to kind of, here you've got a bite-sized piece. You're not trying to do everything, but you're trying to get yourself to do something regularly, and being consistent like that just makes such a difference in our practice. Consistency helps in developing any kind of skill. So here you've got a format, you're intentionally using pictures and words together, because just with that picture, there's no way that you could get that idea of the aircraft and the traffic. They're essential partners, aren't they?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. That's right.
Let's take a look at it.
Perhaps move to 17, the one that has another indication.
This really makes the point very strongly about the pandemic, because on this day 17, a very good friend who's been a friend for 40 years, Cornishman, who I used to play snooker with every Monday night in the local football club. I've played snooker with him for 40 years. He was one of the first people in Cornwall to die of the COVID-19. He was a fit man and worked in a builder's yard, strong, and just a super person. And so this is day 17. It says, cherry blossom in Tywardreath churchyard. Our dear friend Phil's funeral, a victim of COVID-19. As requested, we all wear pink. His family asked when the funeral cortege went past if we would all wear pink because apparently it was one of his favorite colors. And so all the everybody in the village stood out wearing something pink. And then afterwards, I went into the churchyard and painted these pink cherry blossoms.
That's so powerful. That's beautiful.
And it sort of brings home to us all that although some people seem to shrug off this thing as if we're all immune, we certainly aren't immune. He was a fit and healthy person, and he died of it quite quickly.
That's really powerful. We think that as stark and vivid as this experience of being here in COVID, we think that there's no way that we'd forget these experiences. But human memory is such a feeble and porous and changeable thing that without kind of putting down these markers like this is a way of sort of remembering this event and your relationship with Phil, that just taking the time to enshrine these thoughts and feelings on your page, that's going to be a part of you for so much longer.
Yeah, well, I think that's right. I mean, it's every time I see it, I sort of slightly emotional, I must admit.
Yeah, I see why. And it also makes me think about that how this process, it's smaller, more intimate little moments here. I'm seeing feathers. I'm seeing a little cluster of birds, a single blossoming tree, and the thoughts here are so. I feel like you're really generously inviting me to share your thoughts and to share your feelings. You're not telling me how to think, how to feel about this, but I read this and I get it. That this really kind of helps in this. I sort of see these diaries here as kind of going in and really kind of inviting yourself to feel and experience this thing instead of just be distracted from it. You are embracing this experience and being being there in it. This is
interesting. His family have asked if I could do a print of this one particular little square for them, and so I'm going to do that for them.
Tony, I think about this whole piece, and I think about the way that you use diary notes and text notes in all of the work that you do, and this sort of story of these 56 days of your lockdown experience are a very personal story of your journey through your backyard and your home, but also you use those diary notes as a way to sort of reflect out into the world experience too. And do you think about this experience as a sort of a very specific journey experience? Because you were so intentional about it in the same way that you're intentional about the larger, more ambitious global journeys that you do.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. That I set it as a definite project that I had to do, whether I felt like it or not. Just as when I'm doing my major journeys, there are times when you don't feel like doing it, and you would happily. I remember once, just before I was going to go to the Himalayas, I was in the airport, standing in line waiting to check in, and I thought, if I have to wait 5 more minutes, I'm going home. I just really wanted to go home. I really, it's the last thing I wanted to do was get on that plane and go to the Himalayas. But somehow you have to. So in other words, it's not always what you particularly want to do. Sometimes if it's raining, you don't actually want to get up and go out with your sketchbook. It's pouring with rain. During this 56 days, many times I thought, no, this is, what do I want to go and do this for? I've been on this walk, or I've been around here already, and I don't want to do it again. But sure enough, if you force yourself out and get into the fresh air and start walking, then your mood lifts. You start paying attention, and you find wonderful things. And I managed to do that every day, and it lifted my spirits.
So, and you're also, physically taking care of yourself. One of the things that people, say that, for maintaining our health and our sanity, it's important to go for walks. So you're building into, like a lot of people, including myself, I have, sometimes I just kind of get out of my routines, and other times I'm journaling all the time. And here what you've done is you've made a commitment, you've given yourself a project, and that's going to hold you into it. You're tying that into your physical activity that you take. So this habit, this behavior that you have, it's going to make you physically stronger and healthier. It's also going to help reinforce your journaling practice. It's a really, I think, a wonderful example of how you can kind of set routines and expectations for yourself. And it's a lot of work at the start, kind of getting into one of these routines. But once it becomes your habit and your practice, then I went out yesterday and the day before that, I don't want to break the chain.
No, right? Exactly. Once I was committed, I had to keep on with it. Yeah. Otherwise,
I've got this many. I can't break the chain. It's getting late. I better go out for a late walk. Okay.
You can't. That does. Otherwise, you would just have to abandon the previous 36 days or whatever it was. You'd have to abandon the whole lot because it wouldn't mean anything. It had to.
That's right.
It had to have a start and a finish. Yeah.
That's right. So this is just in terms of thinking of like for the habits for ourselves. There are some really good strategies right here in how you set this up that helped you be consistent. And so I'm hearing really clearly that, sometimes it's work.
Sure.
It takes intentionality, it takes effort, and you have to show up for it.
Yeah.
And and if you don't, the entire process comes to a halt and stops.
Yeah.
Right. But if you show up for it, it shows up for you. The sorts of insights.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. There's a wonderful quote from Goethe about that, how until you commit yourself to something, nothing clicks into place. But once you've committed yourself to it, things begin to click into place to make it possible for it to work. And I found that's been true throughout my entire life. Shall we move on to another one? So it says day 44. Rhododendrons, exotics brought from Asia at great expense in the 19th century, have now spread like weeds into Cornish hedges. Interestingly, I'm just working on some trees at the moment in a local aristocrat's parkland, and he's got giant sequoias, he's got coastal redwoods, he's got plants from all over the world that have been growing since the 18th century. So there are some marvelous things there, which I'm working on at the moment.
It was a strange moment in the world when we were collecting things from all over the world to demonstrate our largesse and our world knowledge, for sure.
Yeah. I should explain that we are very privileged and honoured that the swifts come all the way from Africa and nest in our roof. So on day 46, it says the swifts are back! ! Every year they fly from Africa to nest in our roof within 3 days of May the 8th. We celebrate VE Day in sunshine. VE Day was Victory in Europe Day, and it's a great celebration in the UK every year after the Second World War. And although our pub was shut down along with everything else, we assembled outside the pub and took beer and celebrated VE Day. But we were also celebrating the fact that those wonderful swifts had flown, I don't know how many thousand miles, many, many thousands of miles in order to come and nest in our roof, which they do every year. Anyway, the swifts came back that day, so and they nest in our roof, and occasionally a young one will fall down the chimney. And I found that if you pick it up and take it up into the bedroom and hold it out in your hand with your hand open, the swift will stay, and its parents will come swooping round, and finally it'll take off and join its parents, and then they all go off together.
Mm-hmm. And it just sort of a sign that in the middle of all this craziness, nature is continuing forward. Nature is still there, and we can go to it for solace and comfort. Also here in smoky California, we're seeing that it's a reminder to us of this time that just as we go to nature for finding that solace and peace, that we really have a duty and a responsibility to be stepping up to protect it.
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
Try to be stewards of it. And I know that connecting people with place and stewardship and conservation is also a theme throughout your work.
Absolutely.
Would it be possible maybe to speak to that a little bit? How do you see your work, both personally, for you as an individual? How does doing this sort of work both connect you with the natural world and inspire you to do the sort of work which you do in conservation and stewardship? And secondly, how do you use this body of work that you create to try to inspire other people to do the same?
Well, I suppose there are two aspects to it, really. One is obviously the hope that when people see my paintings of these fantastic places and the fantastic things that live in them, just as you do, that will inspire them to realize that these places need looking after, need protecting, and in a way it's simply it could be seen as propaganda for these fabulous places to be left alone. I mean, a wonderful quote from someone, I can't remember who, but maybe it's John Muir, who says that the mark of civilization is not how much of this stuff we can put down to lawns and houses and factories and how much of it we can tame. The mark of civilization should be how much of it we can leave alone. And so I fervently believe that, and I hope that when people see my work, it will be one small argument in favor of just keeping these places and protecting them, looking after them. So there's that side of it, which is immeasurable. I don't know how many people have ever kind of stood in front of one of my paintings and thought, yes, I must send some money off to an environmental charity or what happens. But I've also often been involved in fundraising for certain causes. I mean, the thing I'm most proud of, I suppose, in my entire life is not the exhibitions I've had, but in fact, there are actually, I think now 4 schools in the rainforests in Honduras, which I've raised the money for 2 of them entirely, and 2 others have been sponsored by friends of mine who came on a journey with me and were inspired to also pay for a school each. And so we actually have 4 schools built in the rainforest in Honduras as a result simply of my engagement, really. And that's the thing I'm the most proud of. And one of them is a marvelous school built by the local village, who all live in mud block houses with thatched roofs. And they built this fantastic school, which is 5 times as big as anybody's house, I mean, or any other building in the village. And it's a school and a clinic, and it's just a marvelous thing. And I was honored that they actually, I went to the opening of the school and discovered to my astonishment that they'd actually named it after me. And I'm immensely proud of that. But I've often helped to purchase bits of threatened rainforest or bits of threatened landscape that I think are particularly important. And in fact, the lockdown diary, which we've been talking about, is going to be made as a limited edition print, which we're going to sell to raise money for environmental charities. I don't know if you saw David Attenborough's recent major film, which came out on the BBC last week, and it was about the extinction of species and how extraordinarily fast it's happening. Millions of species going extinct, and literally millions. That's not an exaggeration. And it was such a compelling thing that I'm actually writing to David Attenborough now, because I do know him slightly, and he was involved in the Exploring Beauty exhibition as one of the luminaries. I'm writing to him to ask him now if we manage to raise some money with the lockdown diary, which environmental charities would be the most likely to be effective in counteracting this terrible threat that we now all face of the loss of species. So I'm always involved in that stuff, and I've always been, politically involved as an environmentalist and trying to protect precious places, not only bits of rainforest, but also places on my own backyard that need close attention because somebody wants to cut all the trees down or somebody wipes something out for no particularly good reason. And so it's something that I've always been fervently keen on, and doesn't always make you popular, but it does. You like to think that you do have some influence sometimes, and I guess I am committed in that way.
That's right. And so something that I think is really important here to that I want to kind of spotlight is that when you're thinking about protecting nature, you gave as your example supporting a school.
Yes.
Right? That's critically important, because what you're doing there is you're not just saying put a fence around it, keep people out, but you're saying let's educate people and let's connect people with the value of these places.
Yeah.
And we need that here in the United States. The idea that better education is going to relate in better stewardship and better decision making for how we handle ourselves and our natural resources. That's a really critical link. And then in addition to that, we can support these conservation groups that are doing direct targeted things in this preserve and this preserve, this preserve.
Right.
But not making a schism between there's nature over here and there's people over here. Part of protecting nature is educating those children in that school in Honduras.
Yeah, you're quite right. And actually, to go back to the whole thing about COVID, I think what that brought to people's attention, people were, because they couldn't go to work, they couldn't go to school, people were out paying attention. And that was a really marvelous thing that actually I think there's been a groundswell of people who've begun to realize that accumulating wealth and objects isn't necessarily the way to peace and happiness. But the way to peace and happiness might well be to actually to kick back and actually pay a bit more attention to your surroundings and also pay attention to your relationships. I mean, in the village here, everybody was making sure that all their neighbors were getting their groceries. Everybody was making sure that all their neighbors were okay and being looked after, and if they needed anything, somebody would go and fetch it for them, and so on. And so we came together very much as a community, but not just that, but also that many more people are out walking than I've ever seen before. I mean, I go for a walk every morning, whether it's COVID or not, and whether I'm painting or not. Every morning I'll go for a walk, and whether it's raining or snowing or whatever, I still go for a walk every day. And mostly I never saw very many people. But since the lockdown and since the COVID thing, many more people are out walking and enjoying the countryside and so on. And that can only be a good thing, because why would you bother to protect something you've never even noticed? What's it matter to you if they chop those trees down? I've never even noticed they were there. But actually, once you've noticed them, they're personal to you. And somebody take a chainsaw to them, that's a personal thing. It becomes personal. So I'm hoping that people will kind of recalibrate, really. And I think some people have. It's quite noticeable. That people begin to realize the riches of what we possess. Or possess generally. I don't mean possess individually.
And, may we be intentional enough about noticing those things now, that when we do have a vaccine and we can meet again, that it's not that we actually don't go back to things as they were before, as if that is an ideal of the way that things should be. But we actually we're at a decision-making point here. And what is the world that we want to go back to?
Right. Yeah. That's a huge discussion here.
It's going to take work and intentionality to try to come out on this, because the easiest thing would be just to snap back to, all right, let's get back in the traffic again, right?
Yeah.
I'm struck by something that I believe I've heard you say in the past, Jack, and that is, as you guys talk about this, that the act of paying attention is an act of love, and that in that act, there's so much possibility. And I think both of your works and both of your practices just nurture that for everyone and encourage everyone to pay attention to not just what's going on in the natural world, but what's going on in themselves as they are a part of that natural system. So
I've spent most of my life as an educator in one form or another, and a big part of my goal has been to help people try to fall in love with the world around them. Because if we fall in love with it, then we have the motivation and the resilience to do the work, to be stewards and to protect it. So I've been very specific about trying to come up with a working definition of love itself. And my definition of love is that love is sustained, compassionate attention. And to be able to kind of give that, if you give that kind of attention to your child, to your partner, to a place, to a community, to a tree, your relationship to the other completely changes. And it's through that attention that they morph from an it into a thou. And that the process of journaling, the process of painting, the process of keeping your COVID diaries is going out and being deliberate about paying attention to the world around you, paying attention to the feelings that you have about it and how that affects it and changes you, paying attention to whatever the subtleties of the experience are. And that fundamentally changes your relationship with whatever it is that you're looking at, be that your child, or be that, this was a dead orange-crowned warbler that I found. And I spent time studying its plumage, and I made little notes about it. And by the time I was done, this wasn't just a bunch of dead feathers on the ground. This was something that was beautiful and special, and I reverently placed it underneath a bay tree and covered it with some leaves, and felt a connection between myself and this dead bird. And so just that act of attention changes who I am and the way I interact with the world. When I found this dead bird, my assumption then was that this was a bird that had died in the heat wave. We were experiencing a heat wave at the time. It was really crazy hot, and the bird was found next to an almost dry puddle. And I found, all the other birds were, the other birds that were still alive, they were all, doing that Gular fluttering thing where they open their mouths and they're just like, and they had their wings kind of drooped open to just, and so birds were obviously really heat stressed. So after playing with that little warbler, I found myself like when I was like filling little puddles in the woods, finding little places where there are rocks, and I put some water in there, and then watching warblers and other things come down to them. It's interesting that in this same period of time, it came out in the papers a few days later that there were these massive die-offs of hundreds of thousands of songbirds in New Mexico. And so it's possible that this was due to the heat wave. It might be also be possibly related to this other phenomenon that is larger. There's something else going on and people don't know what that is. And so, but if we're not paying attention, we're not falling in love with the world, we're not motivated to protect it. If we're not paying attention, we won't be able to do the basic science to give us the information to be able to make informed decisions so that we can do the right sorts of things about these sorts of things. So this act of paying attention is critical to our connection with the world, and also being able to be more effective in the responsibilities that we have as being the most powerful organism on the planet. We can, through our actions, change ecosystems easily. And we're doing that on a global scale. And if we're just doing that in a laissez-faire way, the planet is going to continue to really take a hit. So we have to actually make some really hard, careful, intelligent decisions. But it all comes from paying this kind of attention. So I think that this is an essential skill for a human being to have. And the sort of introspection that I see in your paintings, in your and in your written notes, I think that's a really inspiring way to show up for your life and to show up for the planet.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good word also is stewardship. We're stewards of the planet, and I've spent quite a lot of time in my working life with tribal people in remote places, and they are, generally speaking, not only stewards of their places, but they do pay attention. They see far more than I would ever see without them. I remember when I was in Borneo that working in the rainforest, and when I got to know some of the people from the Penan tribe who were hunter-gatherers really, and I got to know them through a series of coincidences really. But once I got to know them and had spent time with them, they would see me painting in the rainforest, and they'd say, Tony, come see this. And they would take me and show me some enormous insect or some bird's nest I hadn't seen, or some frightful thing where this giant slug was devouring a giant worm, and they would take me to show me all sorts of extraordinary things which I never even noticed. I walked past it, but I didn't see it. But they are so attuned to their environment that they see all this stuff, and they would grab me by the arm and say, Tony, come see this, and take me and show me the most marvelous things. And I think we should try and think of ourselves. We should pay that kind of attention. We should understand our environment as well as they do. And if we did, perhaps we wouldn't be quite so reckless with it, because they are fully conscious of their rainforest being torn down for palm oil plantations, and they grieve about it. It's as far as they're concerned, it's the death knell of their way of life, and yet they are the people who understand their environment best. And I found that in quite a few different areas where I've worked, and I found that because I'm there to pay attention to their environment and their place, they are always endlessly helpful and hospitable and friendly and interested. And they love the idea that actually I'm prepared to sit there day after day studying the things that they know all about. The fact that somebody has come specifically to do that, not to do any harm, not to make any money out of them, not to stare at and take photographs, not to just simply to pay attention to their environment and
honoring.
honoring it. Yes, exactly. And I found it's always been a very fruitful relationship. And it does make you realize how we pass by wonderful things in our own environment without noticing, and they don't. They notice.
If you want to learn how to be a better spouse or partner, if we learn to listen, if we want to learn to be a better parent, we learn to listen. And if we want to be a better steward of the earth, we need to learn to listen. And it's that act, the deliberate act of attention, that is both a pleasure, a joy, and it's also a responsibility.
Sure.
Thank you, guys. It's really been lovely. Been lovely for me.
It's been pretty good for me too. I really enjoyed it.
Me too.
I enjoyed the chance to have a good chat with you, Jack.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so delighted that you're participating in this Wild Wonder Conference.
Thank you.
It's inspiring to have you here as a part of our community and a role model and somebody that we can go to for guidance, insight, and inspiration. Well, thank you so much.
I'm honored and delighted. Thank you.
Jack, that was an amazing conversation.
I'm so inspired by that guy. Tony Foster, yeah, he walks the walk, and that is really beautiful to see.
And his lockdown diary, what an amazing project.
And the phone booth.
Yes,
the retired phone booth that he turned into a community art station and exhibition hall in a phone booth. I mean, that's like the Tetris.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I'm definitely putting Cornwall on my list of places to visit because I've got to see that. Yeah. All right, we have a couple of announcements. First of all, the winner of today's Nature Journal Challenge, which we want to make sure we point out is completely just a random selection among the names of people who posted something. This is not a talent contest. We would never do something like that in the Nature Journal Club. Mm-hmm. This is just never. Following that up. So this is not about pretty pictures. It's not you won because you're better than somebody else. It's you won because you showed up with your journal. Yep.
And you shared in our community, and we really appreciate that. And so therefore you rock. And you get a prize.
You get a prize. So this person and the person who wins the Nature Journal Challenge each day this week will receive a $25 gift card to the Naturalist store at johnmuirlaws.com, which has all kinds of cool books and naturalist tools and such. So we will be giving that to you after the conference. And today's winner is Samantha Nolden. So, Samantha, I'm not sure if you're here tonight, but we will email you and let you know. And also, I think, Jack, you can announce this tomorrow morning at your challenge. That'd be kind of nice to say so. The second wonderful prize we have tonight to give away is a new limited edition giclée print of Tony's new artwork, The Lockdown Diary. This beautiful piece that you've been learning about tonight, that entire poster with all 56 of those lovely diary entries, one of you this evening is going to receive that. And this is the thing that Jack and Roseanne and I were arguing over and wishing that we could get to be selected for, but we are not eligible for this prize. Through a random number generator, Roseanne has chosen a name. So I just want to tell you a little bit more about this.
You have to be present to win, right?
You have to be present to win, that's right. So Tony Foster and the Foster Museum share a commitment to celebrate nature's beauty and the planet's wild places, as well as a desire to preserve and protect them. Together, through the sale of this editioned artwork, they have committed to raise funds for conservation and environmental organizations that are responding to the urgent need to combat climate change. All the print sales, after printing, shipping, and handling costs, will go to environmental charities 2 of Tony's Choice, and 2 of the Fosters. And 2 of the Fosters are the Natural Resources Defense Council and the Peninsula Open Space Trust. This large giclée print measures 54 inches by 29 inches, and they're only being printed in an edition of 500. The prints are individually signed and numbered by Tony and printed on beautiful archival paper. This is such a lovely gift. And I'm sorry, Jack, we're not going to choose your name. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I know. But however, it is for sale. And so if anyone who does not win this evening would like to buy one, this artwork is for sale as of today on the Foster's website. It is $500. And again, the proceeds will go to those environmental organizations. And the Foster's website is thefoster.org/shop. So you can check it out there if you're interested. Okay, are you ready for the drum roll? Okay, so this is how it's going to work. I'm going to read a name and I'm going to watch the Q&A. And so I know that's the way that our attendees can participate. So if you hear your name, please pop a little, just say yay in the Q&A so we can see that you're there, and you will be our winner. So Marcia Lynn is our winner this evening, if she is still here.
Marcia Lynn, come on down.
Marcia Lynn, come on down.
Marcia Lynn, yay!
Woo! I can't see the chat. Did she say yes, she's here?
You said Marcia says yay.
All right, congratulations, Marcia. We will be in touch with you to get your mailing address. I think we already have it, but we'll get your email from the Wild Wonder database and be in touch with you about getting that amazing poster into your hands from the Foster. And thank you for joining us this evening. One more little announcement that we have been working really hard to prepare an online auction that will support Wild Wonder's endeavors. And that is going to go live tonight. So watch your email for a link to that. And in that auction, we have a lot of amazing offerings, beautiful things that members of our community have donated, some of them handmade. Oh, I can't wait to share it with you. But also in that auction are several other amazing items from Tony Foster and the Foster Museum. So we are so grateful for those donations. All of those items in the auction have been donated to help support Wild Wonder and our continued programming. So thank you to all of the donors, and thank you to the Foster, and you can look for that auction this evening. The auction's gonna go till even after the conference. So I think it'll end, I think we have it set to end on October 19th. So don't panic if you don't have time to vote. You do have to vote, but yes, if you don't have time to bid during the conference because you're so busy going to class, no worries. You can bid after the conference still, because it won't close until after the conference. So I think I'll turn it over to you, Jack, for a thank you and good night.
Hey, folks, this was this today has been really wonderful. And so I want you to think about, I'm going to put this down so you don't have to look at the reflection of my screen in my glasses. Now you're a blur. But I am, what I like to think about is my little kind of learning brain. The way which we learn is by pushing our brain and challenging it. And some of the folks that are going to be working with you and teaching you this week, they're going to be pushing you. They're going to be pushing that envelope a little bit. And that's a good thing. That's a really, really good thing. Because what we want to do is for our brain to have to struggle and to work a little bit. Another thing that you're going to see is that there'll be several key elements that there'll be a little bit of repetition on. And so different instructors may sort of tie into the same idea, but just in a slightly different way. And the more that we kind of reinforce and think about those kind of major themes, your brain, by getting those in different ways, has a better chance of kind of taking these things and absorbing them. The way that one person will explain an idea is going to be different than the way that another person does. Some people also have their own just completely new tricks. But when you hear something that's like, I've heard this before, but just in a slightly different way, pay attention to kind of what resonates with you. There are going to be ideas and strategies that are going to be presented this week. Not all of them are going to be for everybody. But what you want to do is just really to be a sponge and intentionally absorb what is useful. To help you kind of get more out of this event, take little notes as you're going down, circle them, and then after the workshop, review it that day. Ideally, review it within about 20 minutes of having finished the class. So the class ends before the next. Go over your notes, put little stars and happy faces or googly eyes next to the ideas that are the most important to you. And then at the end of the workshop, at the end of the day, that's now, go over it again and just sort of review those things again that were kind of the key things. Like, what were the things that I highlighted today? And on the last day, I'll be kind of talking about a little bit about the research behind that, but that strategy can really help you get so much more out of these workshops. If you just sort of passively watch it, right, as the presentations go on, you'll be entertained, but your brain will not encode as much information as you would like it to do. Our brains are incredibly good forgetting machines. So you can get so much more out of this. But as it goes, take notes, take sketch notes, and you'll be learning more about sketch notes. And at the end of the workshop, put some stars or happy faces by the key points. Review that again that evening. We'll find out why on the last day, why this is sort of such an important kind of game-changing strategy. But just for now, take my word on it, give it a try, and you're going to find that your brain retains so much more material. So we want to be trying to practice active learning this week. And then these are strategies that you can apply to everything else you do. It's going to continue to be amazing and fun. Have you seen the lineup for tomorrow? Some crazy cool stuff is going to be coming at you. So looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you all for being here. I also want to thank our volunteers and our Wild Wonder team, who, again, have done so much work to make this happen. You people have given us such a gift. We're really, really grateful. And tomorrow's going to be good. So sleep well tonight. And thank you for being with us.